There's a thing that I've been doing on the deepening course, which is a thing called witness consciousness. And it popped into my mind the other day as I was going through the course notes. First things first is, has anybody heard of witness consciousness? I'm not going to ask you any supplementary questions. No, yeah, so it's smattering, yeah. It's something that pops up in meditation if you shuffle around from one tradition to another, especially in the Hindu tradition, and especially in a part of that known as Advaita Vedanta, which is very popular in London, also known as non-duality. Any non-duality people? No, that's okay. It's actually a wonderful thing, non-duality. There's this a Hindu philosopher by the name of Shankara who developed Advaita Vedanta, and from that developed a lot of meditation practices. Not so much about the practices being different, but more about the focus of the practice. You know, what am I doing when I'm doing this practice? Okay, so fast forward to the 21st century, and we all have what we call a sense of self, a who I am. It's a cultural concept. You're not actually born with it. And you can tell this because if you go to people from different cultures and you ask them, who are you? The most obvious difference is in the East. When you go to India, people call me Mr. Robert, because the reason for that is that Indian family names come first. And that's symbolic of the fact that they put family first. So first of all, I'm part of the family, then I'm me. That's just the single most obvious thing. And there's a whole lot of other things. And when you get out into various different cultures, let me give you an example. The women of the Congo put successively bigger discs in their lower lips and ears to accentuate their charms. They also put rings on their neck, and the rings grow and grow and grow, and their necks become elevated, and it separates the cartilages and muscles to the point where they have to wear the rings all of the time. So they're actually disabling themselves for a cultural attribute. How does this come about? And the answer is one ring at a time. And why? It's because to have a ring around your neck would probably have been a big deal in a country where there's very little access to metals. And then to have two would have been more so, and three more so. And so the women with many, many rings on their necks, that's their equivalent of a Bentley. You start off with a Mini, and then you get a next car up, and the next year eventually you're a Jag, and and finally you're a Bentley, and there you go. So then you have this cultural attribute, and unfortunately there's a sense that it brings with it approval. Yeah. And in a way it does, because people approve of the system. We're basically a capitalist system. Anyway, put all that to one side. Who am I? I am whatever I believe others believe I am. And that's not a really unhelpful thing, because you can be perceived as Mr. Nice Guy and then get trashed in some way. And just look at this celebrity nonsense. The purpose of the media is to build a celebrity up so that you can tear them down. So that person who previously had adoring fans and approval on Twitter, which is the most hysterical form of approval and disapproval that I'm aware of, then gets flamed on Twitter by lots of people who spend their lives flaming people on Twitter because they've displayed some human weakness. And so this is the self. And the self is precarious because of that. So if we pin ourselves on the respect of others, and we do something that loses that respect, then who are we? And this is the nature of modern life. Now, many of the things that we do because of this. At a fundamental level, it's fine. It's actually human social interaction. But what can happen is it can become woefully unhelpful. And we can criticize ourselves. The inner critic is almost universal. As far as I can tell, humanity is divided into largely two groups. those who criticize themselves and those who criticize other people. It's the same process, it's just that the target's different. So this is the mind. The mind is, it's supported by all these beliefs, who I am, who you are, what the expectations are from me, you, etc., etc. Big, fuzzy, complicated, ever-changing, precarious thing. And it results in thoughts and emotions. Most thoughts and emotions are related to our social status, our social perception, our social connections. The scenarios that we replay in our mind are about speaking to people. The things that pop into our mind from the past that make us feel the most intense are all almost invariably relationships with other people. And we get drawn into this, and there's a very simple name for it. It's a narrative, it's a story. Eckhart Tolle, who some of you may have heard of, calls it the sad story of me. And the sad story of me is almost universal. There's a small group of people who don't have a sense of insecurity, but you wouldn't want to be them. They're tiny and not relevant. But for the rest of us, we feel insecurity drives us. As we notice all of this going on, what happens is we become familiar and comfortable with it. And the more comfortable you get with the narrative, the less intense it becomes. And the less intense it becomes, the less power it has over you. And in your meditations, you're observing this chatter, or even during your day. Chatter, chatter, chatter. There's the mind chattering away. Because we're in it, let's say our mind's wandering and there's, we're going to have a difficult meeting with someone. Or I'm going to say this, they're going to say that. Or you've had a confrontation. You're going over the confront. Oh, they said this, I said that. But you can notice this happening. We can actually be aware of our thoughts. Count in your mind from 1 to 5. What is it that is observing the thoughts? What that is the witness. And thoughts aren't always there. Now, I know we're in a spectrum of busy minds in the world. And at one level, I've got some actually quite calm appearing students who tell me that their mind never shuts up for a single moment. So don't worry if you're in that group. It's actually not as relevant as you think. So at one end, you've got people whose minds never shut up, and the other time you've got people whose minds might be busy quite a lot of the time, but every so often they're silent. And there's other folk that there isn't actually much thought. So who's out of the group has periods with no thought, where the mind is calm and silent? Okay, that's pretty much what I expected. 10% periods with no thought, and then the volume goes up for the rest of us, and then right at the top end, it's like being screamed at all day long. Right? And none of that matters. But what matters is the question, which is, when there is no thought, are you still you? Of course you are. I mean, let's say you're singing. You're trying to remember the words. You're singing. Yeah, there's no thought, there's the singing. Let's say you're skiing. Very unlikely to be much thought. Oh, shall I go move to the left or right of that tree? Not going to happen, is it? This is why people go skiing. This is why people climb mountains, do abseiling, paragliding, etc., etc. Yeah, mind, silent. Connection to the universe arises, because it's the mind that gets between us and the connection to the universe. So this awareness that's aware of the thoughts, the emotions, and all of the sense perceptions, we call this the witness. The reason I'm doing this is because I actually searched for this on YouTube and on Spotify, and no sense was made by any of the people talking about it. And largely because, although they talk about it, there's no practical advice. They don't say, right, I've discussed the witness. Now we're going to do the meditations that will help you to experience it. That's what I'm going to do. There's also one more thing to note, which is you don't know what the next thing you're going to think is. If you really want to know whether you are your thoughts, that's the answer. You don't know what your next thought's going to be. You also don't know what your next emotion's going to be. You don't get to choose your emotions. They do. Them out there. Those people. And us people, you know. So we're great reflectors of emotion. Thoughts more personal. But because you don't know what the next thought's going to be, it's not you that's doing it. You're aware of the thoughts. You're the driver of the bus, and the thoughts are the passengers. They get on when they want, they get off when they want. And you just carry on driving. And you've got two choices as a bus driver. Unfortunately, one of those choices has been taken away from them by these perspex screens, which is to actually become familiar with the passengers. And even if the passengers are obnoxious, getting to know them is better than not getting to know them. Having some sort of interaction with them is better than not having any interaction with them. And in order to do that, you have to be aware that they're there. You know, rather than staring at the road in front of you, as they come in, you need to notice them. And that's what we do with thought. So now I'm going to do the thing that I said that nobody else does, which is, here we are, we want to understand, we want to experience the state of being aware of our thoughts, and we want some practices that help us to do it. I'll begin with a little tool that I've developed that helps us witness our experience. And it comes about by noticing the sound of the bell as it moves through time. Stay with the sound of the bell. Stay with it. Generally speaking, when we do this, we're experiencing mindfulness. But now what we want to be able to do is when I sound the bell again, and we listen to the sound of the bell moving through time, be aware that you are the awareness that's aware of it. Nowhere to look, nothing to do, no thoughts are needed. It's a little bit like walking along a straight line. You're either walking along the straight line or you're noticing that you're walking along the straight line. That's the difference. So we're noticing the passage of time through the sound of the bell, and we're aware that we're noticing it. And we're aware of the passage of all time. Ticking in the clock, movements in the room, vehicles, traffic, airplanes. All gently passing through time. And the breath. the most comfortable and convenient place to notice the breath for new meditators is the movement of the belly, just at the point where the belly meets the chest. And what we do is we witness the movement, but we're not witnessing all of the in-breath at the same time, because the in-breath is time. It's almost as if it's a tiny bell sounding. And we're following the entire in-breath and the entire out-breath. All the way up and all the way down. And so what we're doing there is noticing the movement of the in-breath and the out-breath through time. And this is one of the attributes of witness consciousness. You become aware of the passage of time, because the witness is witnessing the change in the present moment. So it's like we're sitting by a mountain stream. We're the witness. In the centre of the stream is a rock, and that rock is the present moment. And passing the rock is all change. Sounds and smells and tastes and voices and cars and airplanes and birds and clouds and the movement of the sun and the movement of the earth. And the ticking of the clock, and the rising and falling of the breath. So this is one of the attributes of witness consciousness, is the awareness of the passage of time by noticing phenomena passing. Now phenomena, thoughts, emotions, sense perceptions. So if our mind is chattering, stay with the breath, because the breath is an anchor to the present moment. It's the most useful one for a lot of reasons. And notice the chatter of the mind. Or the pull of the mind. And you can also notice your senses, whether you're warm or cool, tired or alert, comfortable or uncomfortable, relaxed or tense. And also whichever emotions arise. we're noticing the passage of the emotions and the thoughts. Through time. And you can initiate this by taking control of your inner dialogue. And when you use it in your mind, you use it like I'm going to do now. Noticing the silence between the words. The movement of time between each word is the movement of the present moment through time, and you're aware of it. You're witnessing your experience. Might be a lot easier to do here in this group or online, listening to me. So what we want is another couple of meditations that help us to draw us into this experience of witnessing our experience. So, here's one. When we're breathing in, we know that there'll be an out-breath. As we breathe out, we know there'll be an in-breath. So what we do is this. We replace witnessing with waiting. There's actually very little difference. It's not the same thing, but it will get us there. So as we breathe in, we're waiting for the out-breath to begin. And when we're breathing out, we're waiting for the in-breath to begin. So the in-breath becomes a process of waiting for the out-breath to begin, and the out-breath becomes a process of waiting for the in-breath to begin. And we can do the same thing with sounds. At any given time, there's a sound. We're particularly fortunate here because we have traffic and airplanes. So we're able, for example, to notice the sound of a car passing or an airplane. And while we're doing that, we're waiting for the next sound. And we can do this with thought. Thought arises, and we're waiting for the next thought. Notice that this waiting is a calm and relaxed waiting for something that's inevitable. There will be another sound, there will be another breath, there will be another thought. And there's nothing to be done. So when another thought arises, then we're waiting for the end of that thought and the beginning of the next one. So we're not ignoring thoughts, pushing them away, we don't care. At the end, it could be a helpful thought, an unhelpful thought. It doesn't matter. It could be a comfortable sound, an uncomfortable sound. We're just waiting for the next sound, or waiting for the next thought, or waiting for the next. We'll just practice this for a minute or two. And you can explore which one works best for you. Thoughts, sounds, or the breath. Okay, so some of you that will suit, others it won't. So let's move over to another exploration of the present moment. In the same way that we can be waiting for the next sound, thought, breath, we can also be aware that one has passed out of our awareness. So we're waiting for one to come into our awareness. We can also be aware that one of these phenomena has passed out of our awareness. So this is a meditation called Just Gone. You may be able to do it with the ticking of the clock, but generally I teach this with the breath. So as we're breathing out, then we're breathing in, and there's still a ghost of a sense of the out-breath. And as we breathe out, there's the ghost of a sense of the in-breath. Whichever breath we're on, we're aware that the previous breath has just gone. This is an intermediate technique, so if you find it tricky, don't worry, we'll be doing others. And now we can do this with sound, other than the ticking of the clock, which might be a bit tricky. And we only need to be aware that it's gone for a moment. So we're not staying with that scent that is just gone. We just need to be aware that it's gone for a moment. This is usefully achieved with the traffic. So the sound of each car, we're noticing it moving through time, and then noticing the moment we notice that it's not there anymore, the sound has gone. So allowing your mind to be free, again noticing the sound of the bell moving through time. And the movement of the belly rising and falling. This is just to bring you back from what are actually some quite... You might have found something useful in there, but they're quite tricky techniques. So we're just coming back to the present moment through the sound of the bell now. So as the bell moves through time, notice the rising and falling of the belly. Notice that the movement through time and the rising and falling of the belly are moving through time at the same speed. They're synchronized. Belly rising, belly falling. Okay, so now checking in with our posture, remembering the open, balanced and relaxed posture, feet flat on the floor, elbows by the side, head balanced comfortably on top of the spine, noticing the rising and falling of the breath. And allowing the mind to be free. Okay, so now bring your awareness to the space between the eyes. Just notice the space between the eyes. As we bring our awareness to the space between the eyes, we're still able to notice the passage of time because both the breath and sound are still accessible. And so there's no further instructions with this, it's just a gentle awareness of the space between the eyes. And the mind might be busy, the mind might be calm, your mind might wander from time to time and you'll notice and you'll come back on your own, I don't have to tell you. Okay. So one attribute of witness consciousness is the awareness of the passage of time. I'm going to explore the second one now. So my question to you is this. So you're aware of the space between the eyes. The question is, where are you aware of it from? Are you witnessing the space between the eyes from down in your belly? Or in your chest? Or from a place just above the space between the eyes, and a few inches back, equidistant between the temples. That's the easiest place for us Westerners to perceive a witness in the middle of our heads, just above the space between the eyes, right between the temples. So that's where we are aware of the space between the eyes from. So we're looking forward and downwards at it. We're perceiving it from being just behind it and just above it. So it's a fun exercise to then move down to witnessing the space between the eyes from the belly. So then I am in the belly, and I'm aware that up above me, at the front of the head, is the space between the eyes. And then I can move up to my heart. And from where my heart is, I'm aware that the space between the eyes is above me. And then I move back up to where most of us Westerners spend most of our time, in our heads, located there. And so right in front of me and just below me is the space between the eyes. Staying with your awareness there, if you wish, you can choose, you can not choose, you can draw it back, you can allow yourself to become aware of everything that's going on around you, or you can stay there and noticing that third eye, as it's known, the space between the eyes. And we can go on observing it from between the temples, which is the inner eye, if we wish. We just allow our minds to be free. And then we can let go of any awareness of location or focus on any space. And then there's another practice which everyone calls it, just sitting. And just sitting is just what it says on the tin. And we're noticing whatever we're noticing. thoughts, emotions, sounds, the breath, sense perception, whatever's passing on the movie screen of the narrative of the present moment. Just noticing it passing. So we're floating, bathing in the sensory experience of the present moment. And bringing your attention to the breath in the nostrils. The coolness and warmth of the breath in the nostrils. Cool in breath, warm out breath. And the cycle of the breath. And then allowing yourself to notice whatever you can taste and smell, and any tension in your body, releasing it on the out breath, and being aware of being seated, feeling of the feet on the floor. And whenever you're ready, in totally your very own time, you can gently, patiently, compassionately return your attention to your surroundings. Okay, so that was a little exploration of the present moment, and it was a little roller coaster ride through meditations that help us to notice really two things. I mean, so if you look at waiting for the next thought, what's happening is we're constricting the period of awareness. Because if we're listening to a thought can be quite long. Well, I went to this place, said this, and then they said that, and tomorrow this is going to happen, and then next week this is going to happen. And I told them, if I've told them once, I've told them, because it's a long thing, right? If you're waiting for the next thought, doesn't matter how long that is, you're in this tiny, tiny little, less than 300 milliseconds of waiting. And it's the same with the just gone, because it's only just gone for a second. So I'm going to say something at the end of it. When I finish, I'll click my fingers so that you'll know the point at which I stopped speaking. That was it. That's just gone. The bit at the end of the sentence in the mind. And then we're waiting for the next one. Tiny, tiny. And because we're in this tiny little sliver of time, and we're witnessing it, we're sitting on the bank of the stream, we're looking at the rock, and the stream's going past, and the birds are in the air, and the wind in the trees, and the insects are buzzing around, and the clouds are moving across the sky. It's busy. So, mountains are busy places, and there's just us and the rock, and everything's washing past our awareness. So what we're doing is we're shrinking down, and we're noticing the passage of time. That's why mountain streams are fantastic places. Sit there, watch the mountain stream. That's what we do. Beaches are the same thing. You're watching the waves, or you're looking at the horizon. And you're here, now, in the present moment, witnessing your experience. And then, so that's one attribute of witness consciousness. And the other is where is the I which is aware of my experience? Where is this witness? Did anybody manage to move down to their belly, even just for a little while? Anyone? Matt did? Okay. I understand how difficult that is. It's one of these, it is totally bog standard monkey mind here. The more you try to move down to the belly, the more it becomes difficult. But notice probably for the first time for many of you, you were aware that there is a concept of an awareness having a place in space. And for most of us in the West, it's between the temples and right in the middle of the head. So if you say to Westerners, say, point at you, where you are, the center of you, that you're aware of everything else. Because we're very visual creatures, it's up here. And because we've been told that the brain is the source of everything, all of our awareness goes into the brain, we point up here. In the East, they tend to point at the belly. There's a sense that that's the sense of center of awareness. It's a lot more comfortable down there. And so these two things, location, and you can identify that there's a location by knowing that you can't move to another location. So you can't observe, many of you can't observe from, or have the sense of observation from the belly. So here I am in this place. So those two things, awareness of the location and awareness of the passage of time, that's witness consciousness. And it doesn't matter if your mind's chattering. This is one of the big lies of meditation. The mind has to be silent to connect to the present moment, the body, and the universe, and everything, and others. It doesn't need to be silent, but we need to be aware. And that's what witness consciousness is.